Yeah, I would like to chase sand grouse at some point. Just
Yeah.
because if someone's going to claim that there's something tougher out there than a prairie chicken, like, I got to find out what it is.
Yeah, I think I've seen videos of them. Are like, is there a video out there of like wild goshawks chasing them on maybe Planet Earth or something?
Maybe. The only video I've seen is falconry video of them being hawked with look like Jer Peregrine males and like Shaheens and stuff.
Okay. Let me look up a picture of them real quick.
And they're like a blend of a grouse and a pigeon. Which
Yes. So I've seen video. I think maybe we've talked about this on here. Video of goshawks chasing them, wild goshawks, chasing them when they come in to get water. Because what they do is they go into an area that has water and then they soak their feathers.
Yeah.
Which is a really interesting adaptation.
And they take it back to the nest.
I think so.
And the babies suck on the feathers.
Yeah.
For moisture. Isn't that
pretty
wild?
cool. Yeah.
But yeah, you get the explosiveness of a grouse and the shiftiness of a dove or a pigeon, and like,
That's
good luck catching it. And I think actually, do you follow Mark Williams on anything on Instagram or anything?
Maybe. I think so. Yeah.
He was in the UAE for a while. He was like a representative for Marshall.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked him one time about sand grouse, and I want to say he told me that you might actually have better luck from like 400 feet than
a big pitch.
1,000 feet, because by the time your falcon gets down from 1,000 feet, they're at full speed and they are moving and dodging and stuff just like a dove.
Gotcha.
So, but incredibly challenging quarry. And I also know, I think Maverick Ordedo talked about him, and back when he was in the Middle East and they were hunting Hubara, and this is back pretty sure before telemetry, and the common sentiment there was you either catch, they didn't really hunt sand grouse with falcons, and it was either you catch the grouse or you lose your falcon, because like back then, you're not going to be able to track them once they're out of sight. You just hope that you find them.
Yeah. Interesting.
So, yeah. But
welcome to Tail Chase. I'm Nick.
And Graham.
I think we're going to talk about deer hunting a little bit today.
Okay.
We've had some pretty crazy stories that have happened by ourselves and together, both.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about the last deer we killed, the one we got on camera?
Yeah, we can talk about that. That was an interesting season. That was 2018.
Okay.
Yeah, 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And we had gone out in September and shot a doe on film and pulled the shot, made a bad shot, but ended up recovering the deer pretty quickly. Which it happens at bow hunting. It's all part of it. Nothing's ever perfect, and you try.
He only went like
70
less
yards.
than 100 yards.
Yeah. I was shooting big, expandable broadheads, and just if you get any kind of artery or anything with those, then it's pretty devastating, which is what you want. But it would have been better if it was a clean shot. But anyway, so we'd shot a doe on film. I was actually watching some of the video of that.
Oh, really?
And me missing that coyote. So we shoot the doe, and we're sitting there waiting, because we give them a little bit of time after the shot before you go track so that you don't bump the deer. And we're sitting there talking back and forth, and I look over my shoulder, and there's a coyote that comes walking up the trail. And it comes in to less than 10 yards.
Yeah.
And I told you to shoot it or something. So you start to get ready, but it stopped. And so I didn't know if you could shoot around the tree or not. So I go to shoot it and I missed.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't aim quite low enough, and I'm pretty sure it ducked, and the arrow like touched its back. It didn't cut it or anything. It just like skimmed just over its back.
Okay.
And we got that all on film.
Did we?
Yeah. It was just by accident because it walked into where you were like you were filming me, like as we're sitting there talking back and forth.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
That was
Yeah,
that
I
close to
remember
the tree.
it came like trotting along the dam of your pond, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and it came right in.
Yeah. Yeah, so the hunt that we ended up catching on film, we went up to my parents' farm in northwest Missouri, which I'm fortunate enough to have access to, and pretty much the sole person that hunts it. Every once in a while, some other people in the family will sit in a stand, but not the same way that I do. You know, not as dedicated as I am to doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But I shot that doe first sit of the season,
Uh-huh.
then didn't go out again. And we had this really big 10-pointer on the farm that I was really hoping to come across.
Mm-hmm.
Went up to the north fence line, and it was really windy. We got all set up, and then I was like, nah, let's move. Like, this is just not a good sit, not a good spot to be when it's this windy. So we ended up going to a different stand. It's on the west side of the property. Got in there, and Mom and Dad had paid somebody to go in and brush hog a bunch of the brush and stuff, and take some of the locust trees out of the woods. And so we get sat down, and I've killed deer out of this stand before, and I look, and it's like, this is so open.
Yeah.
And you're like, I think you said to me, it's on the edge of CRP field, like right in the corner.
Mm-hmm.
And we had just walked through the CRP field. They don't bed out there or anything. We had walked through it to get to the stand.
Mm-hmm.
And you said, oh, I hope they don't come from the woods because they're going to see us, because it's kind of down the hill a little bit from where the main bedding area is.
Silhouetted. And
Yeah. And I said, well, they ain't coming from the CRP. That's where we just walked through.
Yeah.
And we're sitting there. The stand is a double rifle stand, if you're familiar with these deer stands at all. So we're sitting at the same level on the same platform. You know, it's like a bench seat up in the tree. Graham's on my right, which is where the woods is, and I'm on the left side of the stand. And, you know, maybe 10 minutes goes by, and we just get like the camera situated and everything in the stand. I look over, and there's a deer walking our way.
Mm-hmm.
And I pull up my binoculars, and I could see that it wasn't a deer that I recognized, and it wasn't the big 10-point that I was really hoping to shoot that year. And he had like kind of a funky rack, and so I said to Graham, like, I might let you shoot this deer, because he had his bow with us and a tag. Bow with him, and he had his tag. And I told him, like, yeah, I might let you shoot this, I'm not sure. And then he goes, oh, if you let me shoot that deer, I will shoot that deer. And I got a better look, and I was like, oh, that's a mature buck for sure. It's just kind of got a funky rack, which we'll post a picture of him so you can see. And I was like, oh, no, I'm going to shoot that deer. And he like just slowly walked along and came up our way. And the direction that he was coming, I was not going to be able to get a shot. So Graham's trying to film, and he was blocking my side. So we had to switch sides in the stand.
Yeah.
And so it's like a circus up in the tree. I move around, shimmy around him, trying to not move too much or too quickly and not make any noise to alert the deer to our presence. And I get moved, and Graham's trying to film the deer coming in. He's moving real slow, walking along, feeding. And
my quiver was in your way.
No, your bow.
Oh, my whole bow.
Yeah, the whole bow. So I hand you the bow.
Yeah.
Because there's hooks on both sides, and the way the deer's coming, your bow is going to be in the way of the shot. Yeah. So I hand you the bow, thinking that you would turn around and hang it on the hook behind you.
Uh-huh.
And I hand it to you, and I kind of look over at the deer, and you're like, what am I supposed to do with this?
Yeah.
And I look, and you've got the camera in one hand and the bow in the other, and you're trying to film, but you got too much stuff. And so I'm like, oh, crap. And so I pick the bow up and reach around you and hang it on the tree.
Yeah.
And then he's at like 40 yards at this point. I don't have a shot because it's real brushy, but he's still coming in.
And he's going to come downwind of us, I'm pretty sure, too.
Yeah, the wind was kind of swirling in the corner, and it was just enough of an off wind, which is, I've killed a lot of deer that way, where if the wind is just off enough and they're on your side of the ditch or whatever funnel point you have there, and you can get a shot before they catch your wind, because a lot of times they are coming into the wind, and they know to do that, where they'll have some kind of barrier on their left side, where they know something's not going to jump out from them right there because they can see or hear or whatever the case, and then the wind is coming this way, so they know something's there, they're going to smell it. And those off winds can be really, really great. And he was like almost to the point where he was going to catch our wind when he hit 20 yards. And I can remember as he's coming in and getting to almost to the point where he's going to be open, I look down and you're just shaking. The camera's shaking.
I think I was
you were
more
so excited
amped to film it than to shoot it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was just like, hey, man, we're good. We got him. Like, just stay chill. We got this. And it's weird. I've had instances where it's like if you have a really big deer or a deer that you know you're going to shoot coming in, and that slow process can get you amped up and wreck your nerves and make you take a bad shot. And then I've also had instances, where it doesn't, where it's like if I've got time to think about it, I'm calm, I'm cool, I'm collected. And then other times, where the deer just pops up and I'm like, okay, good. You don't have time to get get or it's kind of weird what triggers it. Sometimes they pop up and you just lose it.
Yeah.
That happened to me a few years previous, where a buck that I've been watching for a while finally showed back up on the farm, and he's at 50 yards, which I wasn't going to take that shot, but it was like just to have him there, and I about fell out of the dang tree. I was so excited. Anyway, so buck comes in, Graham's super excited, and I was pretty pumped at first, but I calmed myself down, made sure I went through my shot process, whenever I drew, and he came into, I think it was like 23 yards. The buck was slightly quartered to, and you started to say to me, and you can hear it on the film, you say to me, hey, he's got his leg back. Don't, or just be aware of that. You might want to wait a second to take a shot. But remember, he's getting right to the edge of where he's going to catch our wind. And I thought that he had taken that shot. At that point, I'm not hearing you. I'm focused on trying to get the job done. I'm already back, anchored, ready to let it fly. And I thought he had taken the step, so I indexed off of where his leg was, tucked it right behind the shoulder, pulled the trigger, and just watched that arrow sink exactly where I was aiming. Perfect shot is what I thought. And see here on the film, me go, smoked him, dude.
Yeah,
and that's our intro. So you can hear the arrow hitting the buck, and then me saying that. Well, it was a touchback because he.
See, and if you like put a dot where your arrow went on the screenshot of his position when you took the shot, you'd say perfect. You know what I mean? But as soon as you see that leg go forward and him turn a little bit, because I feel like I have it saved in my phone, the video in slow motion. I feel like he did duck the shot a little bit. And it just I feel like it really exaggerates, or not exaggerates, really shows how much of a difference it makes when the leg is back versus when the leg is forward, how much of their vitals that exposes. Because, like I said, if you had a screenshot of where the arrow hit with the leg in the position it was in when the shot was taken, you'd be like, perfect, tucked in right behind the leg. But as soon as that leg goes forward, you're like, ooh, no, that's more like back of the lungs, liver. You know what I mean?
But we didn't know that at the time. I thought perfect shot. And so after about 5 minutes, it starts to drizzle.
Yeah.
And
he ran like he was his tail was down and he booked it out of there, which to me usually means they're hit well.
Yeah. And so something to know about the difference between me and Graham. I'm kind of in the middle when it comes to tracking. I like to wait a little bit and not be too aggressive, but I don't like to let stuff sit overnight if I can help it. And I thought it was a good shot. Graham is much more aggressive. He likes to push. Now, maybe that's because he's not the one who pulled the trigger on the deer.
Yeah.
It definitely happened with that doe a little bit, which it paid off. We found her right away, and it was hot. But with this, you're very much more like, I want to see as much as I can of what happened. I've had bad experiences in the past where I've made mistakes, gone out too early and bumped deer,
Yeah.
and ended up recovering them, but it's never a good thing to have that happen. So I decided I was going to get down and check the arrow after 5-10 minutes had gone by, because it started to rain and I was afraid that any sign that's there is going to wash away, because that arrow can tell you a lot about the shot. And I'm expecting to come down there and just see a perfect, pink, red blood covered arrow, lung and maybe heart shot, because it was, right there in that perfect spot from what I had seen on the shot. And I get down and there's stomach contents on the arrow, which is never a good sign.
And it was pretty clean too, wasn't it? Like there wasn't that much.
There was some blood and just a little bit of stomach contents. I'm like, what the heck happened? Because it looked perfect.
It is mind blowing how I've noticed, especially the older I've gotten, like how wrong you are when you saw something. Like I remember shooting a deer one time, and I just knew that it was right behind the leg, right in the heart, or maybe even too low, and that this much of the arrow was sticking out. Like I thought I'd hit him in the leg or something.
You're holding
like
up
that.
like 18 inches.
Okay.
No, I'm not questioning you. For people that are just listening.
Oh, yeah. I thought a lot of the arrow was sticking out.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, I still, to this day, have it burned in my mind. I remember the shot. I remember where I hit the deer. He went 30 yards, and then when I went and tracked him and found him, it was quartering away, and I was only pulling, like, 45 pounds at the time. And so he had ducked the shot, and it had hit the back of his rib cage, quartering into him. Was a good double lung shot, and the arrow was maybe 2/3 into him or half.
Wow.
And it was like, that's not at all what I saw. And I know what I saw. Dang it, I know what I saw, but that wasn't it.
Yeah,
And it's weird.
it is interesting.
And how bewildering in the moment to be like, where even am I?
Yeah.
Right now? Did I dream that?
Yeah. So we decided, which turned out to be the wrong call, kind of, to go up to at least where we could see last blood, and there was not much blood. And as we're kind of working along there, trying to pick this apart before the rain washes away the sign, I look up, and he's standing there at 120 yards in the woods, head down, clearly hurting.
So we flung another shot.
No, that's what we were trying. Not at 120 yards. So we kind of sat there and watched him for a while and debated, what do we do? Because he seems to be pretty out of it. It looked like the shot hit him good, but if it's a stomach shot, it could take him 7 or 8 hours to die, and that's the last thing I want.
Mm-hmm.
So do I try and close the distance with a little bit of rain cover that we have and get another shot off, or do we just let him be? And we decided to try and close the distance a little bit, close enough where I could get a shot. At this point, you've got an arrow into the deer, and he's still on his feet, so you need to do what you can, even if it's a longer shot than you'd be comfortable taking on an alert deer. I want to try and get another arrow in him, if possible. Turned out to be the wrong call. We closed the distance, and as I'm watching him, he bedded down 5 or 6 times.
Yeah.
And then, I forgot. So we're sitting there watching him and debating what we wanted to do, and he kind of slipped over the edge of the hill. And as I'm sitting there watching, I see something flip up.
Yeah.
And so I thought, okay, he just tipped over.
Mm-hmm.
And turns out that wasn't the case. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to kind of get up where I can see over the lip of this little bit of hill here, and if he's still alive, hopefully I'll be able to get another shot into him. If not, he's dead right there.
Yeah.
Well, I start coming in the rain stops, so no cover noise whatsoever, and the wind, I feel it hit the back of my neck, and I hear the worst sound in the world.
Yeah.
And there he takes off. And he ran okay, but he didn't go too far.
Mm-hmm.
And it rained all night.
Yeah.
And so we went to look, and I found pools of blood where he had bedded down initially.
Yeah.
So I think the right move in this instance would have been to not push him. Lesson learned.
Well, see,
But we didn't.
I was thinking that we were just keeping him in sight. Like I was thinking we weren't going to try to close the distance. We were just like, well, it's getting dark. We might as well watch him as long as we can. And then we thought we saw him go down. So then we were like, oh, well, he's down now. Okay, let's go up.
Yeah. So initially it was we were being super quiet,
Uh-huh.
not trying to slip in. It was we're watching him and see but stay close enough where if something happens, we can maybe try and close that distance if we need to or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, so
then,
I looked for 3 hours that next morning and there wasn't much sign. Couldn't find where he had crossed the creek, even though I saw where he did. It's like, man, there's just not anything to follow. And so we just started grid searching.
Uh-huh.
And I'm looking, and you had something to do that next day, so you weren't with me. It was my brother.
I was in nursing school at that point.
Gotcha. So it was my brother, and he, after a long time of searching, I hear him holler, and that he had found him, and that he was dead. And it was crazy because I had walked like maybe 10, 15 yards from him, but he had gone to the thickest, nastiest bramble patch in the farm and died.
Yeah.
And there was a basketball-sized hole in that bramble patch that my brother Peyton had just happened to look over and see that buck, the white belly.
Nice.
And that was the only spot you could see it from. You went 10 feet to the left, you couldn't see him. 10 feet to the right, you couldn't see him.
Nice.
Yeah. So we recovered him, and he had died pretty quick after I bumped him. He was evident from what I found that he had not lived very long after that. And where the shot actually hit was I got one lung, split the diaphragm, and just barely nicked the stomach, and it entirely coated that arrow. There was maybe a 1 inch. Those broadheads are like 1 3/4 inch cut or something. They're big broadheads. It's a Rage hypodermic was what I was shooting.
I think they're even maybe over two blade.
Mm-hmm. Maybe
I think
they're
it's
2
like
inch.
2 1/8 or something. I mean, it's
a
wicked.
big cut.
Yeah.
And there was a less than an inch cut in that stomach, so it didn't even look like the tip of the arrow pierced.
Uh-huh.
The
so it
stomach
just like slid by it,
I guess, and there must be enough pressure in that stomach that the gastric juices coated the arrow or whatever. But yeah. So
did the coyotes get him at all? No,
not touched.
And was it pretty cool that evening?
Yeah, he ended up spoiling a little bit of the meat inside because there was those that bacteria and stuff in their system had been expelled into the chest cavity.
Okay.
But we recovered most of the meat, and because he had been dead for a while before we found him.
Okay. Do you think you think he'd been dead for a while?
Yeah.
Do you think he died like right after we flushed him?
I mean, within a couple hours, I would say.
You would think?
Yeah.
He was pretty...
He went another, from the last time I saw him, probably 100, 150 yards, if that.
Well, and that's only probably
300 yards.
300 yards from where we shot him.
Yeah.
So it really, hindsight's 20/20, but you really wonder what would have happened if you just left him. Would he bed down and die, or would he live for longer because you're not?
No, I think after reading the sign and knowing where I hit him, that he would not have lived very long, because I hit the liver too, which is, so liver, one lung, split the diaphragm, which makes breathing very difficult, and barely nicked the stomach. So I was right there in that area. I think the correct move would have been either leave him sit overnight or come back 4 or 5 hours later and track in the dark. But I really don't like tracking really in the dark.
The pressure on
the rain put the pressure on. I don't like tracking at night, especially with a marginal hit like that, because if you do bump him, you have very limited information as to what happens.
Yeah.
It's best to do it in the morning, but then we were running the risk of zero sign being present because of the rain.
Yeah.
It was just like, what do you do?
Yeah.
What do you do? But because of where he bedded down and how much blood was left, even after it rained all night, I'm pretty confident he was bleeding a lot and would have bedded down
Yeah.
there. He wouldn't have tried to cross the creek. He would have stayed right there and died.
Yeah. He did have an interesting rack.
And he had an interesting rack and no testicles.
What?
Yeah. Which I shot him, what was it, like late October, I think?
Yeah.
Is when this was. So normally, like, you kind of see him doing some chasing, fighting, other stuff. He was walking along eating, which I mean,
Yeah.
you can see in October for sure. But a
Yeah.
lot of times, like, if you're getting a buck on his feet at that time, it's because he's out cruising looking for does.
Did he have a penis?
Yeah, penis and a scrotum,
But no
then
nuts in there.
No nuts.
Do you know if their nuts swell during breeding season?
I don't know, but I mean, I cut because I kind of noticed that they were
Wow.
shrunken. You know
Yeah.
that they didn't look filled, and so I cut and looked, and there was fascia and a little bit of fat, but
Yeah.
no testicles.
That's so weird.
Yeah. So you should tell the story about that giant buck that you had on that place you hunt out by Fairfax.
Okay. Oh man, he was a giant. So, I started seeing him. I have this stand that I call number one, and it's my favorite stand because it's a crossroads where there's a trail going north-south and a trail going east-west, and you have woods on the east and crops on the west, and the border between the woods and the crops is this kind of marshy area with some scrub and buckbrush and stuff like that. And it's just, like, I feel like some of the best deer cover is just like overgrown rabbit cover.
Mm-hmm.
You just look at it and you're like, oh, they can move quickly through it, but it's good cover.
Yeah.
So I see deer moving through that quite a bit, and especially during the rut. And so my favorite stand, call it number one, and I have a trail camera right there at that intersection over a scrape. And every fall I see quite a few bucks working it. Sometimes there's nice ones, sometimes not. But in October, about once a week, I started seeing this giant deer. Freaking huge. Like, someone found his sheds later and scored him. And I want to say he was over 200 inches.
I think it was like 204.
Yeah.
If I remember right.
And just ridiculous. And he knew the camera was there. Like, from the first pictures that I got were like him just barely stepping into frame, and like a picture, I did it in 3 picture bursts. So like a picture of him stepping in frame, a picture of him looking at the camera, and a picture of him leaving. You know what I mean? And so about once a week, he would show up in the middle of the night, midnight, 2 o'clock in the morning. Not at all anywhere near daylight. But if I remember right, it seemed like the pictures each week as the rut was approaching, he was showing up closer and closer to within daylight. You know what I mean? So I was like, okay, one of these weeks, he's going to show up and make a mistake. And I had a picture prior to Halloween of him near daylight, within an hour or two. And so I was hunting Halloween night, and I also had this nice 10-pointer. And I've always wanted to kill a deer on Halloween. That's like my favorite night to hunt.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this nice 10-pointer that I'd seen on pictures come by at 20 yards right through that marshy area that I described just to the west of my stand. And I passed on it because I was like, but if I shoot that thing, sure enough, like the big one's going to come out and then I'll be kicking myself.
Yeah.
So I held off. I let him walk. And then I was in college at that time at Northwest, and I was a TA in the botany lab.
Mm-hmm.
and we were setting up for the next day's lab exam. That was kind of one of the job responsibilities. And I didn't like have to be there because they had plenty of help, but I was hanging out with my girlfriend at the time, and I was like, whatever, I'm here, might as well make a little money. And it was really windy that day.
Mm-hmm.
And we're in the lab, and do you ever get that feeling on a windy day when like you're wanting to fly that evening, or you're wanting to hunt that evening, and you're like, I just have a feeling like it's gonna die right at sunset.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I had that feeling. It was like, right now, no way would I be in a tree. Like, it's howling, the trees are swaying, but I just have this feeling like it's just gonna be perfect right at dusk. So I thought about going home and jumping in a tree. But then I was like, no, like, I should be here. I should be like a good worker. And like, more than likely, I'm not going to be missing anything. And so I stayed and I worked.
You don't remember this little detail, but you texted me.
Did I?
Yeah, you texted me and asked me, should I go out this evening?
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, I mean, it's a little windy now, but it's
Yeah.
going to die down right at sunset and be a good evening.
Yeah. Well, I should have listened to you, because I hunted the next day and checked my trail camera, and I didn't see anything that night. But then when I got home after dark to stick the memory card in the computer,
Mm-hmm.
right about the time that I thought it would die down, which it did that evening,
Yeah.
he walked by my tree in broad daylight, following a doe at 15 yards.
Yeah.
And I have a picture of it. And like, I'll never forget that. And then nobody killed him that year, but somebody did find his sheds. And I kind of found out, it's a small town, so like people talk. And like, he had been seen on multiple farms many miles away.
Weren't his sheds found like
Miles.
like 7 or 8 or more miles?
I think so. I know the guy who found him, but I don't know which farm he found them on, and I don't think he would tell either.
Gotcha. Well, maybe he would at this point, because that buck is definitely dead.
It's got to be.
There's no way that was like 5 years ago.
Yeah,
There's
and
no
he
way
was a
he's alive.
mature, like fat old deer when.
Yeah,
when
he
that
was
happened.
at least 5.
So he found the sheds and put them on a shoulder mount.
Mm-hmm.
Had it mounted. So that was cool to like have some good, high definition pictures that you could look at from different angles and see what he would have been like
Mm-hmm.
had you shot him. But we could maybe post a picture of that too.
Yeah.
Just like, and like, he was my favorite kind of deer, like a typical frame, but just like
everywhere.
junk and like stickers,
Double
and splits
points,
and
yeah.
and not, but not ugly. It wasn't like this. It wasn't like he had a growth on his head.
No.
It was actually a pretty rack.
Yeah.
But just a lot of character, you might
Mm-hmm.
say. And somebody shot a deer that had a similar frame a couple years later. And it was a really old deer, like it had no teeth and stuff.
In the area?
In that area, yeah. And that, they were like, oh, I wonder if it was him, and he's just like declined in his old age or whatever. I'd rather not believe it. I want to think that he died of natural causes or something.
No. We should we got a ton more deer hunting stories, including the buck that I killed this year, which is a pretty cool story. We should save that for another one, but let's tell the story each of our first deer.
Our first deer.
Yeah. Yeah.
With a bow?
Whatever. Mine wasn't with a bow. So I'd been bow hunting for a couple of years. No one really showing me the right way to do things, and had very limited encounters even with deer, I'm sure, because I was just fidgeting in the stand and not sitting in the right spots, not knowing. And I went out opening day of rifle season when I was a kid. I don't remember how old I was. I was probably a junior in high school, I think. And I I'm sitting in the fence line because I didn't even have a stand up there at this point. Really close actually to where I killed the buck this year, and the same stand that we had talked about from the buck that we didn't end up sitting in because it was too windy. And I'm sitting there in the fence line, and I hear something behind me. I'm like, what the heck? And I kind of look, and I just saw a glimpse of something on the other side of the fence. You know, there's brush and stuff growing up, so you can't see. It's not clean. And then I see this buck jump the fence. And in this particular county, you have what's called a 4-point rule, where you can't kill a buck unless it has 4 antler points at least an inch long on one side of its rack. Its left side only had 3, but it was like a non-typical, like kind of funky looking rack on that side. He turned his head and looked at me, and I could see that he had 4 points. And I'm shooting this 30-06 that we had at the time. And
it's a lot of firepower.
Yeah, he was at 75 yards. I pulled up on him, went to pull the trigger, and forgot to flick the safety off. And I flinched. Just terribly. Yeah. Terribly. He saw me, kind of took a few more steps and stopped. And I flicked the safety off real quick, pulled the trigger. Good shot, double lungs. He just drops and then starts kicking and falls like into this probably 20 feet down this kind of steep creek that's on the farm. So we had to drag him up out of it. And I remember looking up right after I shot him, and on the neighbor's property was this other guy walking around. This is maybe 15 minutes after shooting time. He's already walking around in Hunter Orange, aimed right at the buck that I had just shot.
He was like looking through his scope.
Looking through his scope, yeah.
Do you think he was just watching what was going on, or
he was about to shoot that deer?
You think so?
Yeah. I won't get into how I know that, or who that was. I don't
know who it was?
Yeah, I don't remember his name at this point. I found out who it was.
Okay.
And that he was going to shoot that deer and poach it off of our property,
is
what I was told anyway.
Yeah.
But I got him first.
And that was your first deer ever?
First deer ever, yeah.
Okay.
And nobody, by myself, 16 years old.
Do it yourself.
Mm-hmm. Learned how to do it myself, and my dad came out and helped me field dress it and all that. He had never done it either. So.
Yeah, I think I actually told the story of the first deer I ever shot in one of our first podcasts.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm almost positive. But the first one that I shot with a bow, though. So, same farm where this giant buck was. And it seems like every few years, there's a big buck on that property that people know about because it's not way, way out in the middle of nowhere. There's roads and people see.
And the way the farm's laid out, it's fairly visible from the highway.
Yeah, with the timber kind of in the middle, and then the crop fields surrounding it. So, if there's deer out in the field, they're within sight of the road.
Right.
So, there had been some people some out-of-town hunters, non-residents actually, who used to hunt it before we did. And then when we started hunting it, they opted out or decided to lease somewhere else or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And but they didn't want to bother driving all the way out to pick up their stand, so I think my dad bought it from them or something like that. And so there was this ladder stand that, and this is back in the day before safety was as big of a thing. There's no guardrail. It's just a platform about maybe 20 by 20. Mm-hmm. It's not much room to walk around on or anything, and no guardrail, and then just probably a 6 by 12 seat or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm sitting there in the stand. I've got my tree harness on, and you're talking about figuring things out for yourself and learning hard lessons. Well, one of the things that took me a long time to do anything about was warm boots.
Yeah.
I was wearing uninsulated rubber boots that were rubber on the inside and the outside.
Oh,
No felt or anything.
goodness.
Yeah.
That's cold.
And so every time I go hunting, I would just sit there and just shiver and just be freezing, you know. And it was just a matter of how long could I hold out every morning.
Yeah.
So I'm freezing my balls off, and there's it's the rut, and there's little bucks chasing does around, and I think I either had already used my buck tag or something, but I was gonna shoot a doe. I was happy to shoot a doe. And so this little buck chases the doe up from the south, and she comes up and is just like across the ditch from me at I think 17 or 18 yards, quartering away slightly, and shot her, hit the back of her rib cage, and just, buried the arrow. It was a good shot. Got both lungs, I think. And she just bounded away. And then that's the first time that I remember having, like, buck fever.
Mm-hmm.
Which is it's a wild experience. Like, just being so amped. And I wish I could get that feeling back. One of the few things that like does it for me anymore is hawking prairie chickens with my falcons, and that's kind of why I do it. But it's crazy, you're just shaking so bad and like having trouble breathing, and you got to sit down in your stand and hold on to the seat because you might fall out.
Yeah, I definitely find like I still get it every once in a while, especially if I'm cold. Like, and you have that adrenaline dump. Mm-hmm. Or it's like, oh goodness, and yeah, that you can't control the shaking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's cool, man.
And she ran 100 yards, and piled up out of sight, but the blood trail was easy to follow, and I was using my little Parker buckshot was the bow, 40 to 50 pound draw, and just yeah. Technology's come a long way since then.
I really enjoy bow hunting, man. It's a lot of fun. There's just something about the excitement of watching an arrow go into an animal like that. Like, it's very primal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, being that close to them, and the stealth involved, and being in their world, unbeknownst to them.
Yeah,
it's very personal. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's like
it's one thing
to blast one from 100 yards with a rifle. It's a little different to be in their personal space,
and the work that goes in to being proficient with the bow too, I think plays into the appeal to me. Yeah, all the practice shooting in the summer and increasing your effective range and all that stuff. Yeah. We got lots more deer hunting stories that we'll have to cover on future episodes. Yeah. I'm just getting started. Yeah, there's a lot of them, man. Well, thanks for listening, and happy hawking.